With this new plan from Walmart Family Mobile, I get 40 gigabytes of high-speed data for under $40 a month. It's a limited time deal. Ooh, watch out, loose ball. Whoa. That's double the data with no contract or surprise fees. Yay, buzzer beater. All powered by T-Mobile's nationwide network. Makes me feel like I'm a step ahead. Available at Walmart. Double data ends July 31st, 2021. Hotspot does not double. See terms at myfamilymobile.com. Walmart Family Mobile.
Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, and London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south. In the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful March the 2nd, 2021. Rondo Deportes, bonjour, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Oh, Charlton, we're doing okay. Sitting around reminiscing about the 69th anniversary of Wilt Chamberlain scoring 100 points in an NBA game, Charlton. Just a phenomenal feat that nobody will ever equal in the history of basketball. Not only that, Charlton, he set the single-season scoring mark of 50 points a game, 50-plus points a game. And so when you hear people talking about who's the greatest basketball player ever, you know, there's a couple of names that never come up, named Kareem and Wilt, the greatest scorers in NBA history. But once again, I want to think about our frontline healthcare workers, our nurses, doctors, first responders, the greatest medical staff in U.S. history.
Amen to that. And they did their things without a three-point shot. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. When you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars also all around the world. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic from 3,000 miles away. He will do his thing, and I really do appreciate the way things have grown with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Spotify. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Apple TV, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. It's better to have a smart TV, or you'll be sitting there looking at us to a picture. Man, I love pausing, Big C. I love pausing every day, but I will never pause on our Veterans Crisis Hotline. They really are experienced helping veterans and their loved ones get help. Big C, why should everybody care?
Well, we should all care, Charlton. I know Americans are pretty distracted with all the problems that are going on in America, but our veterans created the opportunity for us to have those problems to be distracted about. We lose over 24 veterans a day in this country, Charlton, to suicide. Very horrific, and it's an epidemic that has been going on for decades, and this country needs to pay more attention to it. I know people think about COVID, they think about unemployment, but our veterans fought the wars, Charlton, to give us the opportunity to be able to think about those things. So beyond the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number, Charlton, that we give out every show, this should become a concern of all Americans, thinking about our veterans and the struggles that they go through, and we as a nation need to come together and figure out how to help them in total.
Very well said, Big C. I love doing our part. 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255, or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. If you're online, simply go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net. You can definitely get some help for our veterans. Also, very happy to be affiliated with Valley Homes Weekly TV on Dish TV, Direct TV, AT&T Uverse TV 53, home of the San Francisco Giants and the Say Hey Kid, as well as the home run King Barry Bonds. When you reach out to them, just tell them Big C sent you. Our goal is simple: recruit 10,000 real estate agents and brokers all over this great country, putting people back to work like McDonald's does it, car dealerships do it, sports teams are doing it. Watch TV and real estate work for you. 800-772-8624. That's 800-772-8624. If you're looking for opportunities in real estate, go to bigcsports.pacwm.com. Most of our loans are written by Rocket Mortgage on the wholesale side, the number one lender in the country. Also want to say thank you to Xfinity, Comcast TV, and Comcast Spotlight for presenting Big C Sports to the universe. Just like God said, let there be light. Open your cell phones and just say it. Play Big C Sports Podcast. You will see all of our apps pop up, and I really do appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. Big C, I'm telling you, yesterday the allergies were so bad, and my eyes were almost crying, like Tears of a Clown. I think it was the great Smokey Robinson that sang Tears of a Clown, but I feel so much better today. I think it went from sunshine to now it's overcast in California. That's as close as we get to rain in California, Big C. Thoughts?
Well, Charlton, we continuously get liquid sunshine down here in the South. Everything is always bustling and green, but it makes it bad when the springtime comes along with all that pollen in there.
All that pollen in there, but at least you got water when you turn on the faucet. You don't have to drink water out of your bottle. It just falls out of the sky. You guys down south is all fair in level war. I want to touch today. In fact, before I even get into some Black history, I want to talk about something that I think only you and I have talked about, Big C, outside of the Supreme Court. It just went down today. You do owe me some red wine. I like my wine California red, Big C, if that makes sense to you. But it's so much that we have that sometimes we can take for granted, Big C, that we just have things, that we think everything is going to be the same. But we also just can't take things for granted. It's important to me, Big C. So today, the good news is that not only did it not rain in California, that's going to come, but the Supreme Court, it rejected many of the 253 voter suppression bills, mostly by white Republicans, in states affecting minorities. The hearing it was about the argument to shoot down the 1965 Voting Rights Act bill. So I'm really proud that the Supreme Court had a surprisingly good day, and they said no because they made the good old boys see. We just want to take away their right to vote, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, they were blunt and said they wanted to take away the right to vote for black people, Charlton. They only wanted to attack states that were heavily minority districts. They didn't care about the white people. They let them stand alone, and have what they've had. But they've constantly attacked the rights of black people to vote, Charlton, which were provided by the United States 14th Amendment.
Yep.
If people took the time to read the 14th Amendment and stop concentrating on the First Amendment and the Second Amendment, the 14th Amendment is the most important amendment of all amendments, Charlton. It's actually when America began, not 1776, but 1863, I believe it was, 1865, when the 14th Amendment was written. People need to take the time to Google the 14th Amendment and understand what it provided for all Americans. And if they understand it and if they respect the 14th Amendment like they respect the First Amendment and the Second Amendment, Charlton, it could damn near abolish racism in America.
Yeah, we know that's part of the heart, but I want to congratulate Chief Justice John Roberts and also Justice Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. They're all conservative, Big C, which means there is hope. They're conservative and they're white, except for Clarence Thomas. And they're conservative and they're white. And that's who the Constitution was originally written for. It was not written for a woman. But you know what you and I always talk about, you say sometimes things won't change. I say they do change. And it's not about what color someone's skin is, about the color of their heart. But they all express, Big C. It's so important that people understand as we're looking at who's scoring the most points in a sports game. But they all express concerns that the proposed test either wasn't workable or that it contradicted the text of the Voting Rights Act that was signed into law by Lyndon Baines Johnson in 1965. And after Craven conceded that the state could not require every ballot to be cast at a country club. You know, there's a lot of black Americans at country clubs, Big C, right? Only on TV. But Barrett warned that his argument has some contradictions in it. I think it's so important because, Big C, this is about, as you say, it imposes unnecessary burdens on racial minorities. And I think about my own family. They were always relocating from the South to come out to the West because the racism was not as such in your face like lightning, Big C. It was more subtle. But I'm glad the Supreme Court, that's predominantly white, And even if you want to add in Clarence Thomas, they did the right thing this time, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, like I said, these lawyers walked in and basically said, we're trying to abolish the black vote in America. This is a racial law that we're trying to get the Supreme Court to implement. We're trying to get the Supreme Court to separate the rights of Americans, black versus white. They were blunt when they said this, Charlton. They didn't pull any punches. And that's what you have to understand. They were so brazen that they could go in and tell the Supreme Court that they were operating on racism, not law.
Yeah. Well, the whole country's been developed based on white male skin privilege. And the thing that gives me some hope, because I'm not an ignorant person, and I even found sometimes when guys only want to talk about sports, man, you play football, man, did you see the game last night? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that too, but we got to go to a higher level of thought, because I know most of our sports brethren, and people do what they want to do. I've been following sports programs for, 40-something years, Big C. But my heart felt bad that there'll be more thought given to March Madness coming up than it was given up to the madness that was happening with these conservative white men and these conservative white states trying to tell people who are people of color that we don't want your voting. And they took it to the Supreme Court. And to me, maybe guys are afraid to talk about their rights for their families and their children, but I'm proud of what you and I do. Even though we don't agree on everything, I'm proud that we were salient enough to delve into the Supreme Court. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, when you bring up those statements, you can't take sports shows that you listen to and watch and expect them to speak politics, because they are what they are. You have to turn yourself to a political or news channel if you want to hear people speak along those lines. Those shows are demographically designed to be what they are, talking about scores, talking about athletes. They're not on there to be a political agenda. And so if you limit yourself to just listening to those, then those are the thoughts that you're going to be pigeonholed with.
Yeah, well, I did hear some other sports brethren talking about Vladimir Putin and Russia, but it's all fair and love and war. I'm very, very proud that the Supreme Court did the right thing. Do the right thing! And they did the right thing today, Big C. Always do the right thing, no matter how many people appreciate it or fight against it. It's not over, though. You know they'll try to come back, Big C, but they're just like...
Well, no, it's not over, Charlton. No. Trust me. They heard the arguments today.
Yeah.
They have not come back with their defense. So that's the thing you have to understand. They'll hear arguments. They don't have to accept all of the arguments, Charlton, but the Arizona case is still on the table to obstruct the voting rights of Arizona. So this case is not over. They just heard the oral argument today. The Supreme Court never comes back with its decision in the same day.
Yep, but they're going to strike it down. They've already told you people that. You can argue it, but they're still going to strike it down. But just like a cockroach, Big C, sometimes you got to shoot it with lightning, because sometimes that spray doesn't work. It's all fair and love and war. I want to touch a little bit on black history that became a little bit more emboldened today, Big C, with what the Supreme Court did, listening to the Voting Rights Act, and they're denouncing it, even though you got a right to make your day heard in court. It's all fair, love, and war. Black history, that was live, Big C. We live it every day, and the Supreme Court saw it today. Anna Pauline called Pauli Murray, November 20, 1910, July 1st, 1985. Pauli Murray lived one of the most remarkable lives of the 20th century. She was an American civil rights activist, the first black person to earn a JSD Doctor of the Science of Law degree from Yale Law School, Big C, the founder of the National Organization for Women, and the first black woman to be ordained Episcopal priest in 1940, 13 years before Rosa Parks. Murray sat in the whites-only section of a Virginia bus. Think about that, Big C, with a friend, and they were arrested for violating state segregation laws. The same stuff that was trying to pull getting rid of the black vote today. The Supreme Court struck it down. They still got to hear the whole thing, but they'll strike against it. The incident and her subsequent involvement with the Socialist Workers Defense League, it led her to pursue her career goal of working as a civil rights lawyer. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, see, these are the things that I always advocate about reading. And when people understand the crux of black history, it didn't start with what people think was the civil rights movement. We've had so many influential blacks in the history of America that did things to lay the table, Charlton, for blacks up to date.
Yep.
Not just about sports, which everybody wants to think is the only accomplishment that black people have made in America. You think about how much white people love black athletes, how much they're in love with LeBron, how much they're in love with Michael Jordan, how much they were in love with Michael Jackson, even Cardi B today, how much black people love them. Why can't they put that same admiration towards all blacks, Charlton, and get rid of all the vitriol that we have in America? And when you talk about this lady, Charlton, her accomplishments that were done in America back in the 40s, long before the civil rights movement came along, that people got national press about. Think about all the vitriol that she had to deal with prior to the media having TV cameras.
Yeah, and that's part of life. Since 1619, there's always been a push for some type of freedom, liberty, and justice for all. As a lawyer, Murray argued for civil rights and women's rights. She also crafted a broad vision of justice, equality, and human rights, using words as her primary tool to fight for liberation. Think about this. Her legal arguments and interpretation, what we just talked about today, Big C, of the United States Constitution, were winning strategies for public school desegregation, women's rights in the workplace. Almost every woman can work anywhere she wants to work now. Black women fought for that. Black women fought for that, even though most of the managers are Caucasian women. Black women opened up the doors for women to get into the workforce, Big C. Also, rights in the workplace and an extension of rights by the LGBTQ community, Big C, based on Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you think about Ms. Murray's involvement, Charlton, in politics. You know, people didn't talk about women's involvement in politics in the 60s, and yet she was a forerunner, Charlton, of things to come that was later people in later generations benefited from.
Yeah.
I mean, she was even appointed by President Kennedy to be, you know, an activist in the White House as far as rights of colored people, Charlton, and women in America. Yet we only hear about Dr. King, you know, meeting with you know, President Kennedy and that. But we had a woman that was appointed by this man to be in the American government.
Yeah, NAACP Chief Counsel Thurgood Marshall called Murray's 1950 book, States' Laws on Race and Color, the Bible for the Civil Rights Movement. She served in 1961 to 1963 Presidential Commission on the Status of Women, being appointed by JFK in 1966. She was co-founder of the National Organization for Women. Ruth Bader Ginsburg named Murray as a co-author of a brief, the 1971 case Reed versus Reed. It was in recognition of her pioneering work on gender discrimination. Isn't that what people talk about so much today now, Big C? Your thoughts?
And you think about it, that a black woman in America was the forebearer of all these things,
Yeah.
Charlton. We talk about Thurgood Marshall as a Supreme Court justice and the cases that he argued in the Supreme Court, but he used the writings of Murray, a black woman,
Yeah.
to get him to that point of success and move on in life. And people would not know about this young woman, Charlton, of all her great accomplishments, that what she did. People always talk about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and
Yeah.
being a Supreme Court justice, but not without the help and the writings of Murray, Charlton, she would have never risen to those heights.
Yep.
So when we think about the power of black women in America, from slavery to today, Charlton, and all of what they provided, we celebrate all these black men that have become athletes and what their accomplishments were.
Yeah.
Without these strong black women, Charlton, to lay the foundation of framework for all these black men that have succeeded in life. Even my mother was one of those, Charlton, to allow me the opportunity to have success. So when we think about the accomplishments of a black man in America, Charlton, never forget about the women that provided that opportunity for him.
Yeah, amen to that. That's why I even love when a lot of African-American men will thank their mother, say hi, Mom. They can thank dads too, but they normally say hi, Mom, whenever they do something that's acknowledged on television. So just people in mind, you can Google it all over the world. Her name is Anna Pauline Murray. And when you think about opportunities in the United States that are primarily enjoyed by Caucasian women, Big C, black women open the door for them to walk on through. It's all fair and love and war. I do want to touch on some black history. Debuting March 3rd, which is 2021 on Big C Sports. Big C, it's important. Every pro team's Jackie Robinson. For every person familiar with baseball's pioneer, the great Jackie Robinson, there are others who don't know about Elman Tunnel, Big C, the first black pro Hall of Fame, or Ann Gregory, the first black woman to enter a United States Golf Association-sponsored event. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, we have such a rich history, Charlton, of black culture and black athletics in America, but many people want to think that Jackie Robinson crossed the color line for all black athletes. No, he didn't, Charlton. There were black athletes who crossed color lines 5 years before Jackie Robinson ever got that opportunity to be with the Brooklyn Dodgers, Charlton.
Yep.
There's been such a rich and illustrious history of black, participation in America, and we're going to start tomorrow, Charlton, letting people know about that.
Yeah, it's important. And you'll hear as we do it, more people will do it too, but they won't talk about the advances that have been made in the United States Supreme Court by African Americans. Big C Sports talks about it all the time. We can never set up and dribble. In fact, we've never set up and dribbled as a society. We'll identify over the next 2 months the black and Afro-Latino players who integrated all-white professional teams starting in 1942, 5 years before Robinson's Major League debut through 1962. More than 40 athletes are included in this timeline, and their stories, I believe, deserve to be told. Notable moments in black history will also be featured, as well as law, because we are a nation of law as well. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, this is what, broadcasting is all about, Charlton. Educating your listening audience and being steadfast on the storylines that you tell. You just can't be one-dimensional when you're talking to people because they will lose interest. As much as telling someone about a sporting event, it is also important, Charlton, to educate people why those events were allowed to happen.
Yeah, I love that. So debuting that on the Big C Sports Show, I think we've been doing so much for 6 years, and when I look up and realize that we sometime to boldly go where no man or woman has gone before, that was the mantra of Big C Sports, and I really do appreciate it that we're on top of so many things, especially the right for our own people to vote. And I know sometimes we say, well, a sports show won't cover that. Yes, they do. It's for smart shows, because some shows out here in the Bay Area, they talk about it, even if it's just for 30 seconds, they still talk about it, Big C. I want to touch on, before we get on to the Big C pause, there's a good old boy by the name of James Harden. He becomes the first player to record 30 points, 15 assists, and 10 rebounds, and 0 turnovers since 1977, Big C. Your thoughts?
Many people don't look at James Harden as a complete basketball player, Charlton. When you turn on a sports show, everyone says LeBron James this, LeBron James that. But you think about how difficult it would be to be in an NBA game with all these tremendous athletes that we have today and go through a game, Charlton, without having a turnover when you're handling the basketball the majority of the time for your offense. And James Harden was able to accomplish that feat for the first time in, some almost 40 years in the NBA. So you think about how astonishing that was to be one of the premier scorers in the NBA, and now you become one of the top assist and rebound guys in the league, also averaging almost a triple-double a night.
Yeah, he started doing this thing at Artesia High School in Southern California, went on to Arizona State, played for the Sun Devils. Now he's doing his thing. He's gotten smarter over the years. He's jumped around where the money is, like the hopscotch, follow the money. He's been following the money as opposed to playing for pride and all that stuff. They see, really appreciate the Beard doing his thing. 2018 MVP on an absolute clinic against the San Antonio Spurs, scoring 30 points, dishing out 15 assists, grabbing 14 rebounds in the victory. The performance, statistically speaking, it was historic, Big C. Harden became the first player known to ever post a 30, 15, and 10 line without committing a single turnover through individual turnovers have only been tracked since the 1977-78 season. A lot like, I guess, Curly Neal didn't have a lot of turnovers for the Harlem Globetrotters, but James Harden plays more fair than Curly Neal did back in the day. All-around dominance has been a staple of Harden since joining the Nets. He also dominated at Arizona State, and he was dominant at Artesia High School in Southern California. While his scoring has decreased from the absurd levels that he reached in Houston, where he had liftoff almost every night, Big C, he has been averaging an NBA best 11.1 assists per game since joining the Brooklyn Nets, along with 8.4 rebounds per contest. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, took his game, Charlton, to assimilate it into the Nets scheme of play. Steve Nash has done a marvelous job of getting him incorporated in that system that he has set up in New Jersey. And you think about how well he has performed. Everybody talked about Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, how the Nets would be going because of him. But you look at Kevin Durant, he's missed 14 consecutive games. And, you know, James Harden has become the pseudo-leader of this team.
Yeah, I think there's more going on to Durant's quote-unquote, oh, I put my hamstring, than what they're telling people. It's all fair and level. We all saw what happened when they played Toronto. I just hope he's not going to be talked into playing before his body says that he's ready. But it's all fair and level in war, and people do what they want to do, Big C. I want to touch on, speaking of Durant, he's missed 11 of Brooklyn's last 12 games. Despite a rocky start, Big C, the Nets have now won 9 of their past 10. Harden at the helm. It's put Harden almost unthinkably back into the MVP conversation. Whether they're MVP or not, I think Harden has his best chance ever to at least get to the NBA Finals before they're knocked off by the LA Lakers. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, right now, I put him at the top of the MVP conversation. When you talk about his numbers of what he's doing, you know, double digit, you know, almost a triple-double every night, Charlton.
Yeah.
Since joining the New Jersey Nets. You got to say that he's more valuable than LeBron James. Everybody is saying LeBron James was a pure MVP of that, you know, of the NBA. He's the most dominant player in the NBA. But you have to also look at how the Lakers have performed since Anthony Davis has been out of the lineup. LeBron James hasn't been able to carry this team night after night successfully. But you go across the country, Charlton, and look at the New Jersey Nets.
Yeah.
And you can't say that about James Harden. With Kevin Durant being out of the lineup, they've actually become a better basketball team. You talk about 11 of their last 12 games.
Yeah.
The Lakers can't say they've had a stretch like that. And when you talk about the historical numbers that James Harden is putting up, right now he has to be number one as far as the MVP. He's having a season quite kin to the one he had in 2018.
Yeah, LeBron would just hold up one hand and see the 4 championships, Big C, but it's all fair and level war, looking for number 5 this year. But I agree, there's so many great athletes and basketball players that are playing in the NBA, and the only shame, Big C, is that we can't see them all every single night unless you're going to sit around for hours upon hours and watching games. That's why I like to record games and come back and watch the highlights. But he's doing a lot of great things down there, over there in Brooklyn, playing for it at the Barclays Center. I do even like the floor of the Barclays. It looks like a crayon floor, Big C. It looks like a cement basketball court that a lot of people have in cities, and then they have this crayon color. I guess people come in and have some nice looking crayons to make it look more professional. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, all the floors in the NBA have become quite different in design, Jonathan. It's more about flash, but it's still the same hardwood.
The same old hardwood. We're going to take what's called the Big C pause, also known as the Big C timeout. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the world of sports, the NBA, and the Supreme Court. Thank you for doing the right thing. In the words of the great Arnold Schwarzenegger, we'll be back. All right, we are back from the Big C pause, also known as the Big C timeout. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. There's so many apps, and I really do appreciate the growth with Big C Sports. I also want to thank Xfinity Comcast TV and Xfinity Comcast Spotlight for presenting Big C Sports to the universe. Just like God said, let there be light. Open your cell phones and say, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will see all of our apps pop up, and I really do appreciate the way things have grown with Big C Sports. I want to take you right back down to the state of Texas. Not for long like Ted Cruz. I will fly out pretty soon. But Victor Oladipo, Big C, the Houston Rockets guard, Victor Oladipo, recently, you know things have changed when you can turn down a 2-year, $45,200,000 maximum contract extension, the most the franchise can offer him before the end of the regular season. Everyone's doing fine when they can turn down $45,200,000. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, they're trying to get a deal, as they say, you know, what they're trying to do in Dallas with Dak Prescott. They're trying to sign you for less than what the max would be. If you sign that deal now, then they can get away with paying you less. He wants to play out the season, Charlton, and if he doesn't play out the season, they'll probably end up trading him. He came over, he was part of that Russell Westbrook trade when they did that 3G deal, and he came to Houston. But Houston has shown that all the great athletes want to get out of town.
Yeah, they want to get out of Houston, and it's such a beautiful city. Other than the hurricanes that come through there every now and then, and other than the grid that freezes people when the politicians were working on building a wall as opposed to making sure their energy grid was up to speed. Is all fair and love and war. But Victor Oladipo is in the final year of a 4-year, $85 million contract, and that leaves the Rockets with decisions to make prior to the March 25th trade deadline, Big C, including whether they will make him available in the trade talks. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I think he will be traded, Charlton. When you look at this organization, they did set the reboot. Think about it. They got rid of Westbrook. They got rid of Harden. They got rid of Capella. And now when you look at Oladipo, who is not willing to re-sign, Charlton, I think the best thing for them is to move him and get some draft stock and capital for him.
Yeah, and they probably will. He's going to be doing fine no matter what. Anywhere they can turn down $40+ million and they're not worried about money, that just shows you the state of the NBA and how powerful that players' union has been for the men that don't shut up and dribble, if that makes sense to you, Big Z. Also, NBA news, San Antonio Spurs will begin welcoming back fans, at least some fans, March 12th, meaning half of the NBA now has a plan in place to allow limited attendance a year and a day after a shutdown because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I think in the state of Texas, when you look at all the teams, that they're going to be full capacity before you know it. The governor of the state of Texas, Governor Abbott, mentioned all COVID-19 restrictions on the state today. So when you're talking about the Dallas Mavericks and the San Antonio Spurs, Charlton, most likely they'll be able to host full arenas before you realize it.
Yeah, there are also some people that say it's okay to swim in alligator-infested waters, but it doesn't mean you should listen to your CDC and not some of the governors that are pressured because of politics. It's all fair and love and war, Big C. I mean, everybody's going to do what they got to do. A 16 team, the Boston Celtics, have also planned to welcome back fans at March 22nd at TD Gardens, Big C. The Spurs reduced capacity at the AT&T Center will be at 3,200 fans to allow for proper social distancing, and a team was saying that on Monday. I know here in Northern California, Golden State, they're still not allowing fans in. I think it's all dependent on the county, of course. But also there's something called COVID fatigue, and unfortunately, that puts our first responders still in jeopardy, Big C. I just hope that people are smart enough to not deal with the fatigue and still listen to the science, but I can only manage what I do with my own life, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, it will come down to ownership of these organizations, Charlton. Are they willing to buck the science and just say, okay, open the doors to everybody? Are they still willing to practice some social distance? The thing that I don't understand is that everybody who is lifting all these restrictions, whether it's a news outlet or whether it's an organization, why do they not walk around without a mask on? Why do they not want to get up face-to-face on people?
Yeah, Big C. That's a very good point. Even with the NBA All-Star game coming up down in Georgia, I know the mayor was saying, Keith Bombers was saying, people keep to your social distancing. Don't gather around and pretend as if we're all past this, because there's still people who are dealing with those challenges from COVID. But I wish everybody nothing but the best. Big C, I want to touch a little bit on the NFL, that I really do miss the NFL. I miss the NFL like I miss German chocolate cake. It is a great cake, and it tastes almost like the sweet dessert version of the Big C burger. A tasty burger. It comes with exotic meats. If you've ever had a German chocolate cake, my mom makes the best German chocolate cake in the universe with the caramel and the coconut and the chocolate. It's amazing. Maybe I eat too much of it. I got to cut down some. But NFL football, when you think about it, could Alex Smith be Cam Newton's replacement in New England? And just before you think about, no, he can't. He's not mobile. He's always like one hit away from being injured again. And I don't know. I mean, nobody wants to see that, but everybody can say that about every play in the world of the NFL. The Patriots signed, think about this, they found a former number 1 overall pick in Cam Newton to replace Tom Brady after he left for Tampa. And then Washington planned to roll with Dwayne Haskins, but ultimately they rallied to the postseason after the surprise return of Alex Smith, Big C. He's also a former top pick as well, and dealing with a life-threatening leg injury, he was able to, with the help of medical doctors, come back and play NFL football, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you got to look at that New England situation, Charlton. They only brought Cam Newton in for a one-year contract. So he's that free agent out there right now. He's in search of a team. And does he really fit with the scheme of things that go on in New England? I mean, when you look at when Tom Brady was there, Charlton, that was an offense that was, predicated on a non-mobile quarterback and getting rid of the ball real quickly.
Yeah.
And when you think about the players that are coming back that are opted out in COVID-19 free agency, Charlton, and they're going to be back on the roster, they're going to be players that were akin to that type of scheme that they had in New England. So who would actually be the better fit? We know that Alex Smith is a better passer.
Yeah, maybe, but I still, COVID was different, and also Cam had that surgery, but he can't, he just needs to rehab, but that's my opinion. Both offenses struggled mightily when it came to throwing the ball, an essential part of modern NFL offenses, and which veteran really is a better fit for Belichick, Big C. If you would think about when Cam came back, he had a couple of really solid games until COVID showed up, and that's when things went south for the young man out of the University of Auburn. But it's all fair and level war. If you think about this, between the lines on the field, who's better? Maybe it would be Alex Smith, because Cam right now doesn't seem to do the things necessary to make a 2021 NFL offense behave the way it's supposed to. But again, I'll go back to Cam pre-COVID, Big C. But ultimately, you got to throw the football well, whether it's Alex or Cam. And Alex Smith announced himself as a Band-Aid kind of fix-it-all kind of guy, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, regardless of what you bring into New England, who knows what the direction of this organization is going to be over the next couple of years, Charlton. They're going to have so many players coming back into New England. They had 8 players opt out because of COVID-19 last season. All those players are eligible to come back. And then you think about the players that they already have on the roster. This is going to be a very strong team. This is like Bill Belichick going out into free agency and going out there with a dump truck, bringing all these players in.
He might need a dump truck, all that money that Bob Kraft been giving him in those paper bags. It's all fair and level word, Big C. It's nice when Kraft owns so many things in football like a hobby. It's all fair and level war. Going back down to the state of Texas, where not even Ted Cruz wants to go and live in the state of Texas. He just wants dumb people who don't read to vote for him, Big Z. Senator Ted Cruz, what a joke. Building a wall and then getting in an airplane to fly higher than the wall they built to keep him in Texas, if that makes sense to you. The Houston Texans, Big C, restructured running back David Johnson's contract. Now, which will be worth up to about $6 million in 2021. And think about Oladipo turning down $40+ million. David Johnson in a different sport, the NFL, is going to be $6 million in 2021, including, I think it's a $4.25 million is fully guaranteed at signing. Johnson might have been a salary cap casualty. If he had not restructured his contract, Johnson would have been owed nearly $9 million in 2021, of which just $2.1 million was guaranteed, Big C, and that's before agreeing to the restructured deal, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you talk about saving cap space. That's what these teams are trying to do now, Charlton. We know that the salary cap is going to be less in 2021 in the NFL. So, I mean, David Johnson made a smart move. Do you want to be out there on the unemployment line and taking the veteran minimum? Or do you want to have us shave $5 million off your contract and you know that $4 million of it's going to be guaranteed?
Yeah, sometimes you just put the numbers in front of somebody and it makes them sign the contract. You know, it's something that, I mean, I hear different things about, and I wish everybody well. But for the grace of God, people go through different things, challenges, emotional, physical. It's all fair and love and war. But I think about how much better, and I don't even want to say this without sounding foolish, but the average basketball player, Big C, in 1 year, they can set up their lives so much better than the average football player that plays the game for 5 years, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, it all depends, Charlton, when you say that. Are you talking about a top-line player, or are you talking about a guy at the end of the bench? I mean, it's all relevant when it comes to that.
Yeah.
Anybody can look at a guy in the starting lineup and say, wow, you know, the guy got a $35, $40 million contract.
Yeah.
That's great, just like the starting quarterback in the NFL. But it's those role players that you don't see play night after night. What are their situations? And it's anybody in the NFL. It comes down to education, Charlton, about setting up yourself for 5 years down the road.
Yeah.
What is your need to live on? If you got that contract, say I'm going to spend it all, it doesn't make any difference whether you're in baseball, hockey, basketball, or football. You spend it all. When you live beyond your means, and we've seen many NBA players go broke, just like NFL players. I've seen $100 million NBA players go broke, not have a dime.
Yeah.
So I don't think that an NBA player can set up himself any better than an NFL player, Charlton. It comes down to intelligence and not living beyond your means.
Yeah, and sometimes when you're being sued, of course you say you're broke. That's just some words from a lawyer. You don't say, I still got $50 million. I mean, that tells people you're a target, and oftentimes people get in a lawsuit just because people can, even if it's tossed out.
No, there was an NBA player, Walker, played at the University of Kentucky down there where your buddy John Calipari is.
Yeah.
And I can't remember his first name at the moment, but he was the number 1 draft pick of Dallas, I believe it was. He went through over $100 million, Charlton, and when he was in bankruptcy court, he had lost over $100 million. I think it wasn't Kemba Walker, but it was a kid named Walker.
Yeah.
And so just because you're in the NBA doesn't mean that you're going to be stable at the end of the day. Even Allen Iverson, if he had not had an annuity set up by Reebok Shoe Company, Charlton, when he signed with them, it was going to give him $50 million once he turned close to 50 years of age, Charlton. Allen Iverson was broke a few years ago. He actually filed bankruptcy. And he was a former NBA and number 1 overall draft pick and MVP.
Yeah. Well, Donald Trump's filed for bankruptcy protection 5 different times. It's just a tool that people use, and so they can not have to pay out their credit. This is all fair and love and war. And I wish everybody well. Miami Dolphins, they're moving on from linebacker Kyle Van Noy just 1 year, Big C, after he signed a 4-year, $51 million deal in free agency, Big C. If the trade isn't found, his release will happen in the coming days. Van Noy's departure is going to save Miami about $9.75 million in cap space, and that's going to raise their total to more than $36 million. But whether he has to, I mean, it's amazing. $51 million doesn't mean a thing if it's not in the bank, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, it doesn't mean a thing if it's not guaranteed. The only thing you're guaranteed in the NFL is your signing bonus and the salary you make that particular year.
Yeah.
But we were just talking about the New England Patriots, how Bill Belichick was going to need a dump truck to bring all those great players back in. Kyle Van Noy, if he gets released by the Miami Dolphins, he'll find his way back to the New England Patriots where he won 3 Super Bowls with that team.
Yeah. It's amazing how that kind of money, and they have been saying there have been a lot of reports of dump trucks hanging outside of Robert Kraft's home. He has several of them, but it's all fair and love and war. It just shows that people have to protect their money, because sometimes you will get sued, Big C. NFL football is an attorney that wants the most serious charges against ex-Kansas City's coach. You know, he had the accident. Coach's son, Andy Reid's son, his name is Brett Reid, an attorney for the family of a 5-year-old girl critically injured in a crash involving the former Kansas City Chiefs assistant coach, Brett Reid, Big C. And they want, of course, the attorney's going to ask for the most. But they want, the girl suffered devastating brain injury. It left her unable to speak or walk, and that's horrible, Big C. That young kid has to go through that because a guy's drinking and driving and doing whatever foolish thing he's doing. And likely may have permanent brain damage, and she will endure for the rest of her life. And her attorney said in an interview that was broadcast Tuesday on ABC News Good Morning America that we're going to be, and this is for people who drink and drive, and for everyone who thinks that you can drink and you can drive and that you know how to handle your drinks and everything's okay. We just talked about a guy not getting $51 million because it's not in the bank, Big C. But think about this, and I'm going to throw it to you because it's something that everybody has to deal with, Big C. They're going to be advocating for the most serious charges against a former NFL coach, assistant coach, and the most serious sentence that Brett could ever receive. I'm just saying, I think they're going to get him off on some good old boy privilege, that NFL privilege. He may do some community service, but I doubt if he's going to be sitting in a prison for many, many moons, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I remember when the organization MAD came around, Mothers Against Drunk Driving.
Yeah.
And we still have white people breaking that law today and getting away with it, Charlton. You admit to law enforcement that you've had some drinks, and they don't take you to jail.
No.
White skin privilege, what it comes down to. What you did was almost cost the life of some black people, Charlton. That's what it came down to. You destroyed this little car that you ran into with your huge pickup. And they're more concerned about your health than what they are about the little girl's health, Charlton. It's not up to the attorney to say what the most serious charges will be. This is the reason why you elect district attorneys. You're going to find out whether there's white skin privilege in this situation.
Well, we already know that it is, Big C. The thing is if it goes to some type of jury trial, you know they're going to do the best they can to get someone sympathetic. And I hope that he is treated the way they treat black men. And I'm not doing that. That's how liberty and justice for all, right? That's what they say. But think about this. Reed is the son of the Kansas City Chiefs. Head coach Andy Reid, who's beloved in the NFL, has been the team's outside linebackers coach at the time of the crash. He was initially, as the young girls were in the hospital, okay, he was initially placed on administrative leave immediately following the crash. Not sent to jail. He wasn't in jail. Now, you ask the average person driving around in a big SUV, and you have a crash. We just talked about what happened with Tiger Woods. That was supposedly a crash by itself, even though there's no witnesses of it. In Hollywood, where everybody, celebrity, the paparazzi would have seen a mosquito fly in the middle of the night, but they couldn't see Tiger Woods crash. But be that as it may, Big C, he was placed on administrative leave following the crash, no longer an employee of the team. His contract is not renewed days after the crash. He did not travel with the team to Tampa, Florida for the February 7th Super Bowl that Kansas City lost. But he was not in jail after two young girls went to the hospital, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, when you tell the police that you've consumed alcohol and they can smell it on you, Charlton, and you've also told them that you've used prescription narcotics, which you're not supposed to be taking both of those and driving.
Right.
And the police say, let us take you home. Let's make sure you get home safe.
Yep.
You know what the scenario is.
Yeah, and so I wonder, I'm not going to mention her name because I don't want to give her free publicity, but she's known as an ambulance chaser. Everybody knows her name. And she's always advocating for someone to do some time, especially if the accused person is African American. She's a Caucasian lawyer. I don't want to give her any free publicity, Big C. But even Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, you don't see that at all. I mean, we haven't seen, they've been so quiet as that church cat that sleeps on the cotton, whatever you call it down south of Big C. You haven't heard anything about it. And that's why I fear that the young girl, they're going to offer a settlement, and the family's most likely going to take the settlement, and he's probably going to get some type of community service, because that's what's happened when you're rich and white and you're famous, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, this comes down to insurance companies, Charlton, being sued. I don't think that you can sue the Kansas City Chiefs, but if the Hunt family wanted to be kind to the community and say that they're upstanding, is that they will take care of this young girl the rest of her life, Charlton, and she's going to need aid the rest of her life. But, it'll come down to the max that an insurance company can pay out. But if Clark Hunt wanted to show that he's up above everybody as a caring, concerned individual in that community, this is a family, Charlton, that owns one of the largest trucking companies in America. When you think about Hunt Trucking, that family owns that trucking company, Charlton. Yeah. Not only that, they're the largest individual owner of silver in America. Yeah. And not only that, the Kansas City Chiefs, a billion-dollar corporation. So if they wanted to extend an olive branch, Charlton, we know that Brett Reeves is going to get preferential treatment from the judicial system there in Kansas City. Yeah. And what this young girl and her family is going to have to go through the rest of her life, Charlton, is not going to be fair. It wasn't fair from the accident. That you're parked on the side of the road and he rear-ends you when you're parked. That means that he could not see what he was doing, Charlton, and yet he got a chance to go home that night.
Yeah, and the authorities said they are still awaiting a toxicology report in the case, and no charges have been filed, Big C. That means zero.
Toxicology report, Charlton, takes all of 24 hours to do. Okay?
Yeah.
With labs the way that they are now, Charlton, and to be able to examine someone's blood takes 24 hours to get that done. Yeah. It's been a month.
You can take a breathalyzer test, and that happens instantly, Big C. But he said he was drunk and he was drugged up.
They did not administer a breathalyzer. You think about that.
Yeah.
You admit to law enforcement that you've been drinking, that you've consumed at least 3 alcoholic beverages,
Yeah.
which makes you legally drunk in any state in America. And yet they did not administer a breathalyzer test to this man. So I look at the negligence of the police officers also that should be put on administrative leave for not doing their job in protecting citizens' lives.
Yeah. Well, that's called white skin privilege in the United States, and a lot of people know that it exists. And I hope that his attorney, the attorney for the young girls, can get some justice. But I just don't think they will. But
it's not up to the attorney to administer justice, Charlton. It comes up to the legal system, the district attorney, and a jury. That attorney for the family is going to be a civil litigator. He is not a criminal litigator. He's a civil litigator. This comes down to Brett Reeves' attorney and the district attorney.
Yeah, well, you already know the writings on the wall. It's all fair and love and war. I want to take it to another thing it's very... I just like to give out what I see or what I hear about. The Major League Baseball, I believe everyone should be innocent until proven guilty. We just talked about the Reed son that wasn't even arrested after admitting to drinking and being on drugs and crashing into a vehicle. Now young girls have brain damage. Major League Baseball, Big C, the Los Angeles Angels suspended coach Mickey Galloway because of sexual misconduct allegations. Not a car crash. No one ended up in the hospital. Allegations. He's suspended, Big C, because of allegations, okay? While the Cleveland Indians, when he was with them, the husband of a woman that he was allegedly having an affair with. When you have an athletic background, you're rich and famous, the man's wife allegedly was having an affair with him. And so the husband, instead of talking to his wife, he calls the team. It sounds like a setup. If your wife's having an affair with a man, why are you calling the man's employer? So the husband of a wife, allegedly, that was having an affair, allegedly, with that man, the husband calls the team, the employer. He didn't call the man or call his wife. Anyway, Big C, now he has some more issues, shenanigans, because of whatever his background is. He's suspended by the Los Angeles Angels. And one man crashes car into the back of another car. 2 young girls sent to the hospital, not even arrested. A man accused of having an affair is suspended, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, both of these individuals were suspended. You have to understand, when Brett Reeves had that accident, he was suspended by the Kansas City Chiefs and his contract wasn't renewed. So those two things are similar. And you also got to look at this baseball coach. You got to look at the writing in his contract. That's the thing that people don't understand in the general public. And you have to look at that also. When you have conduct codes in your contract, when you have ethic clauses in your contract, those are the things that give the teams the right to suspend you and fire you. That's what you have to understand. You can't look at it on the surface that it's just this man calling an organization, Charlton. Is that when he was hired, he went through an interview process.
Yeah.
They're always going to ask you, is there anything that we should be concerned about that happened in your previous employment? And if you tell them no, then you're being dishonest. Just like you're going to have in any court of law. They put these things in, the organizations do, to protect themselves. So if he was not forthright with the Angels about what occurred with the Indians, then they had the right to suspend him.
Okay, it's a lot like what's going on with Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York, Big C. But where I disagree with you is what I said earlier. Men and women do what they want to do. They say they're hanging out with friends, they're really in bed with somebody else, and that's what they want to do, that's what they do. No one can force someone to not do that. But if a man finds out that his a wife allegedly is having an affair, why would a man call the employer?
But have you ever signed a professional contract, professional sports contract?
I've signed contracts that are in broadcast. Hold on, you asked me a question. Let me answer it. California law protects people, Big C. I've signed real estate contracts in the millions of dollars. I've signed insurance contracts in the millions of dollars. I've signed employer contracts. And I'm telling you, California law protects you.
You have to understand, professional sports does not cross into those lines. I'm asking you a specific question. Have you ever signed a professional sports contract?
I've signed professional contracts, and I think you're misunderstanding my point.
Sports.
Okay, my answer is yes. My answer is yes.
Particular word. Have you ever read a professional sports contract?
Yes.
And have you ever read the conduct detrimental clause in one of those contracts?
Okay, the answer is, I told you yes, but let me ask you this question. If they're going to start suspending people for who they sleep with, the whole sports universe is in trouble. Everybody sleeps with who they want to sleep with. I'm just saying, if a man says his wife is screwing around on him, does it make sense that you call that man's employer or that you call your wife about that, Big C? Your thoughts?
As you always say, Google it. Go back and Google and see how many professional sports personnel have been suspended for conduct detrimental, whether they are a broadcaster, whether they are an athlete. You have a clause in your professional sports contract as a broadcaster or an athlete called conduct detrimental. This is the reason why you see a lot of broadcast networks on television have somebody on one day
and then
they're gone without an excuse. And people are like, what happened to this person?
Yeah.
It happens all the time. Professional teams have it also. Regardless of whatever real estate contract you want to sign, and you can do it in corporate America, they have it also. They put that little clause in there that we were just talking about people being sued. That little clause, Charlton, allows them to get out of their contract so they're not party to a lawsuit. And so it's called conduct detrimental, and is a broad swash of what an organization can get rid of your employment for. And that's what happens. They can suspend you without pay, and they can terminate you because, with cause is what it's called. And so they put that it's a huge clause in the contract, and it does not go into the area of real estate or anything else, Charlton. But when you're dealing in a high-profile situation, you get a bank manager. He has a conduct detrimental clause in his contract also. And so these protect these organizations. So this coach getting suspended, he had that conduct detrimental clause. And when he went through the interview process, I can guarantee you he did not answer some questions properly, which gave them the ability to suspend him without pay based on the investigation that goes on. I can read one of those clauses in a contract. I still have contracts from when I played, and they're not much different in wording today than what they were 40 years ago.
Yeah, it's just a little bit odd that you sue people when you can because they got money. The husband discussed the affair in April of 2017 with a Major League Baseball security official who told him that Callaway wants this all to go away, and that to me is to me they're trying to get money out of people.
But think about what you said. He discussed it with a baseball security official.
Okay.
All professional sports have their own security office, whether it's the NFL, NHL, Major League Baseball, or the NBA. The NFL security office is run by a former FBI employee, a lady who was a high officer in the FBI. They have their own because they want to protect players and owners and all officers of NFL teams, Charlton, against fraudulent things that can happen to them or people trying to exploit them.
Yeah.
But this is one of the key reasons for the conduct detrimental clause in the contract. And like you said, he went to a baseball official, and that baseball official is doing the investigation. But they also going to inform this coach of what's going on. And if this coach doesn't let the current employer know what's going on, that probably was the reason for his exodus from the Cleveland organization, Charlton, because of that. Because he made the organization be liable for a situation. And so he did not explain that to the California team, Charlton, so they put him on suspension. That's what any employer is going to do when you come up and you do things dishonestly.
Yeah, well, be that as it may, if they're going to tell every athlete or person working in white-collar, blue-collar jobs that if you have an affair, that your aggrieved partner can call your employer, and she's not a part of the employment. That's my point. If she worked for the organization, yeah. But somebody is sleeping with a professional athlete or coach, calls the organization saying whatever she's aggrieved about, and now she wants money. It's all fair and level war. People can do.
But what if that situation hinders your ability to do your work at its full ability, Charlton. Think about that. That's what the employer wants from you. They want optimum concentration and non-distractions from your employment role. But when something gets in the way of distracting your employment, they have the right to remove you from that situation, and somebody that they can put into that situation is going to concentrate fully on it. And they're not going to be distracted, and that outside entity is not going to come in and disrupt the ebb and flow of the organization.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of athletes that have wives and girlfriends, and a lot of girlfriends that have husbands and boyfriends. And when we start suing people because of who they're sleeping with or having them lose a job, and you don't work for that company, to me, it's a slippery slope, but it's all fair and level war.
But you say that all the time. You have the right to sue. I've heard you say that many times. You have the right to use the judicial system to go in and get what you want or get what you feel that you deserve. And this is one of those incidents. You can't have it both ways. But it comes down to if he wanted to sign with that team, for him to be forthright and forthcoming with that team when they interviewed him. They just didn't walk in and say, sign this contract. They interviewed him and put the clause in place. And they're going to ask you, is there anything that's going to jeopardize your employment or the organization that we need to be concerned about? And if he tells them no, then they're justified in suspending him.
It's all fair and level where I think that puts a lot of business people in trouble when someone goes after your employer after you're having an affair after it ends. Whatever, it's all fair and level where people do what they want to do. I want to close out on one final story. I know it's not Black History Month, but it is Black History Day, Big C style. It's all fair and level war. NFL, Big C, and all of these guys better pay attention to what's happening with the gentleman we just spoke about. In the last 3 Super Bowls, only 2 quarterbacks remains with the team that he helped guide to a Super Bowl. You have touchdown Patrick Mahomes, Kansas City Chiefs, Jimmy Garoppolo, San Francisco 49ers, and then traded Jared Goff for the Rams, was sent to Detroit, and now you have free agent Tom Brady with the Patriots. Now he's in Tampa. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, when you talk about something like that, and people talk about trying to get to the Super Bowl, just 3 short Super Bowls, Charlton, and 2 quarterbacks are no longer with the teams that led them to the Super Bowls. What do you consider a franchise quarterback? And you know, people talk about the Rams acquiring Matthew Stafford, and that here it is, Jared Goff had just got him to the Super Bowl 3 short seasons ago, Charlton, and yet they didn't foresee him as part of their future, so they go out and get a much older quarterback and bring him in. I think if the Rams don't make it to the Super Bowl this year, Charlton, with that move that was made, I think they should look at firing Sean McVay, the coach, because you can't blame it on Jared Goff. They saying that this guy is a quarterback whisperer, and you know Jared Goff just couldn't execute the system properly. So that all of a sudden now you're going to bring in, you know, Matthew Stafford. You don't have the excuse of even being second in the NFC West. You say you have the best defense in pro football, and now you say you've upgraded at quarterback. If they don't win the NFC West and are not in the Super Bowl representing the NFC, Charlton, I think that Sean McVay has to be fired, just like they fired the Doug Peterson in Philadelphia 3 years after he won a Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's all musical chairs. Maybe they swiped right, Big C. A lot of people swiping right nowadays. It's all fair and level war. I wish everybody nothing but the best. Big C, back in the day, there's a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, rumble, young man, rumble, Big C, with all you've got to use. How can you lose? What are you looking forward to in this sports universe?
Well, Charlton, like I said earlier today, 69 years since Wilt Chamberlain scored 100 points. And no one has ever come close to that, Charlton. The closest anybody has ever come was the late Kobe Bryant, Charlton, with 82 points in a regular season game. But he had the 3-point shot following him. And once again, I want to thank our frontline healthcare workers, our nurses, doctors, and first responders. Every shot of vaccine that everyone gets comes from their hands.
Yep, from their hands. Everybody, rise and shine. No matter what you do, rise and shine every day. You can rise and shine every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, my mom always says there's never ever an excuse for racism or domestic violence. If you know any man, woman, or child going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and ask for help, because no man, woman, or child should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.